Welcome to the latest episode of WSP's Anticipate podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Bruce, the Sustainability and Climate Change Service Lead for WSP's advisory business in the Middle East. The built environment is considered one of the biggest factors impeding net zero and net positive goals, with construction and operation generating an estimated 38% of global greenhouse gas emissions. However, pockets of meaningful change are taking place. In this episode, we question whether or not the built environment is ripe for decarbonisation. We explore the need for realistic energy transition within the retail sector, and we discuss how COP27 and COP28 can accelerate progress towards a 1.5 degree world. I'm joined today by Ibrahim Al-Zu'bi, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Majid Al Futtaim. Thanks, Ibrahim. And just to start, very pleasure to have you here. I know you're very, very busy, so I really appreciate that you've taken some time to talk with us.
No, thank you for the invite. I highly respect WSP, and you're a fellow panelist and colleague, and thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Looking forward to this discussion. So just, I guess, for an overview to our Anticipate listeners, could you give us a just brief introduction to yourself and your role at Majid Al Futtaim?
My name is Ibrahim Al-Zu'bi. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Majid Al Futtaim. I work and act as the custodian of the sustainability strategy, There Today, Change Tomorrow, and manage the sustainable finance work and ensure that we implement our sustainability commitments across our operating companies, be it in the properties, retail, which is Carrefour, or lifestyle, or in the leisure, entertainment, and cinemas business. I am also the elected chair of the Corporate Advisory Board of the World Green Building Council and the vice chair of the board of the UN Global Compact UAE Local Network.
And Ibrahim, could you give us a little bit more insight into the work that you're doing with the UAE's National Committee on the Sustainable Development Goals?
Thank you. And I think I missed that as well. I am the chair of the SDG 13, which is Climate Action Global Goals, or SDGs initiative. It's a UAE initiative that was launched during the World Government Summit in 2018 to align between the public and private sector and create a platform for three main organizations, three main sectors. One, the United Nations, which is the intergovernmental organization. Number two, the governments and the private sector. So as you may know, the SDGs, we have 17 of them and more than 193 countries, and a lot of companies, a lot of groups, NGOs committed to align their work and their strategies with the SDGs. So there differs between social, partnership, peace, and prosperity. So we look at 5 P's: people, prosperity, profit, peace, and partnerships. So these are the 5 main pillars for the SDGs. My role with the National Committee is to chair and manage the SDG 13, which is on climate action. And I have the pleasure to have a couple of distinguished people on my SDG. My vice chair is the managing director of EBRD. I have the CEO of HSBC, CEO of SAP, CEO of Cisco, CEO of PepsiCo. I have the chair of the Arab Youth Council on Climate Change and the CEO of EV Lab. So we have full representation, be it on youth, financial institutions, fintech, technology, as well as built environment as Majid Al Futtaim, and developers and investors as well. So my role is I serve for 2 years with different with clear KPIs, and our main KPI for SDG 13 is one to look at the resilience and adaptation part of climate change, compliance and risk. The second one is look at the sustainable finance as an enabler to achieve the SDG KPIs endorsed and committed by the governments. And the third one is to look at transition, just and inclusive transition from to what we are right now for the next at least 7 years now with SDGs, but with net zero commitments the 15-20 years. I work very close with other SDGs like SDG 17 partnership, the SDG of sustainable finance, sustainable production, consumption, cleaner production, life underwater. So they're all interlinked, of course, together. And what helps me a lot with this is my strategy in Majid Al Futtaim is linked directly with 14 of the SDGs and indirectly with the 3 of the SDGs. So this is in a nutshell what we do in the National Committee. And we always meet on the side of the World Government Summit, all the chairs of the SDGs, all the members, and where we have full access to regulators, we have full access to governments from the private sector perspective. It's a great opportunity to look at how we can work together to achieve such targets, and mainly to introduce the sustainable business model that we are all head to.
Great, thank you. And, SDG 13 being climate action is probably arguably one of the most important goals of the UN SDGs in total. And in our industry, the ability to facilitate public-private partnerships and incorporating governments into the discussions is so important. So it's really exciting to hear that you've been involved in that element. I guess talking a little bit more about Majid Al Futtaim as a business, there's so many different opportunities for retailers and developers to start incorporating green initiatives into their existing assets, new builds, and their operations. Could you share a little bit about what the path that you've been looking at is to integrate particularly net zero and some of the net positive commitments into Majid Al Futtaim?
Thank you very much for this question. I think your question will direct us to a practical solution for the climate crisis, which is the built environment. So I will give examples, and I will share with you how I look at it and how it can be one of the low-hanging fruits to achieve a government or a national commitment on net zero. Now, as you may know, Majid Al Futtaim is committed to be net positive in carbon and water by 2040. Net positive is to go beyond the net zero, beyond the neutrality, to give to the environment more than you take. Now, regardless, that time, we did this commitment in 2016. We're the only one in this part of the world. We hope we'll see more, and few globally. And regardless, we achieve the target or not, and we are on track, by the way. This bold commitment managed to unleash a lot of innovative ways to implement, which is the built environment. Now, why the built environment? Built environment, as you may know as well, and I'm sure you know, and the audience would know, that we're responsible up to 40% of the energy consumption, and 30 almost the same with water. And when it comes to circular economy, we do produce around 30% of response of the waste. Now, so if we want to go after net zero commitment for any country, let's go for a practical solution. Let's talk about the built environment. In Majid Al Futtaim, we looked at it as a narrative, a business imperative. We looked at it as an opportunity, and we were lucky that the industry were also adopting to new technology and new solutions. So the first thing we looked at is looking at the indoor air quality and the built environment itself with green building certifications. So that was that. And I think we have more than 45 buildings that is either LEED or BREEAM gold certified. We have around 2,200 BREEAM dwelling good certified, more than 3 million square meters of green certified area. So that was, of course, we worked with this with consultants like yourself and the industry. Collectively, we created a demand and there was a supply. Collectively worked on that. So with a green building certification, we have know-how. We have the right people on both sides on the supply and the demand. And actually, we have experts now, abundance of green building and sustainable building experts. Now, the second part is when it comes to climate change mitigation. Climate change mitigation, we talk about efficiency, energy efficiency, and absolutely everyone will agree with me that built environment should be your first target. So we did that, and we looked at it. That was our first low-hanging fruit. We invested in CapEx, and we found out that, hold on, we're not only doing climate change mitigation, but also we are saving money. There is a clear ROI from climate change mitigation. That was the business imperative. Then, hold on, we stopped and we said how we can introduce a sustainable business model based on what we've done so far. And this is where we created our net positive commitment. So we used our own assets as sustainable business proofs. We have the region's first net positive building in Tir Al Ghab, the experience center there. We started to have policies. So we have a green building policy. Anything we build must be LEED Gold or BREEAM very good or equivalent. We have also renewable energy policy. Anything we build, 25% should be from the peak energy should be from renewable generated on site, and the rest off site. And what we've done in Jordan to generate 60% of our Carrefour energy from an off-site generation, so with a startup, is a great narrative for that. We are saving around 4 million Jordanian dinar, around $7 million a year, just from looking from off-site generation of clean energy. So we looked at the profit, people, and the planet with that. The third part, we looked at the wellness, the indoor air quality, especially post-COVID-19. Post-COVID-19 now, people do care about the HVAC, ventilation, indoor air quality. So we were already calculated that through the green buildings. So in a nutshell, built environment, which is our properties business, which one of our main biggest businesses, proved that there is enough supply and demand and financial institutions to invest in mitigation and adaptation, and you can accelerate your net zero commitments if you look after the built environment. Last but not least, when it comes to financial institutions' role, it became also a no-brainer for sustainable finance, for financial to invest in green buildings, to invest in green bonds. So we have around $2.7 billion so far from Green Sukuk, the first green global benchmark in Green Sukuk, 600 million, 5 times oversubscribed, 2 rounds. Then we did 1.5 billion sustainability-linked loan. So it became a platform for investments, for pension funds, for investors to do the not only to make money, but also to relate to ESG and sustainable finance, doing well by doing good. We are doing good. We invest in green buildings. We assure that there is a reduction in carbon emissions, and we make money. So that's actually a success story, I think, not only for Majid Al Futtaim, but also for the industry, for Majid Al Futtaim, for WSP, for the Green Building Councils, to say that you can do proper sustainable business formulas. At the same time, you can hit the triple P approach: planet, profit, people. And always my recommendation for any government, especially in the global south, if you want to go after a low-hanging fruit for net zero, go after the built environment. You hit the mitigation, adaptation, and resilience at one time. You have access to capital with finance, and you have a know-how experts in abundance, thanks God, as well as there is a demand from the end user, which is the customers.
You touched upon a lot of different topics there. I think, a few things that I was really glad to hear from a developer side is the fact that, yes, this does add value. It's not just about, investing money and not getting that return. It makes business sense. And I think now more developers are looking into the whole life cycle costs of implementing sustainability measures and actually showing in the market that this is having a really positive impact. And you're completely right around the wellness element too. I think, by incorporating energy efficiency measures, water efficiency measures, and then adding wellness into that, it makes those spaces places where people want to be and spend their time in. So it's really good to see that nexus between wellness and energy and water start to come together in the real estate sector. I guess, taking a step back, and Majid Al Futtaim is very progressive in terms of their policies and things that they implement. Now that you see yourself against competitors in the region, and these policies with regards to climate become more robust and matured over time, what do you think that will do to developers in the region? What impact will that have, and what do they need to be aware of and be ready for, having gone through that journey yourself?
I think they should start looking at it from a compliance and risk management. And to answer that, they need to institutionalize sustainability, making it in the core and the DNA of what they do. Of course, from a Majid Al Futtaim perspective, we like to invite all the people, all the organization, including competition, to join our sustainability journey. We need to see more net zero commitments. We need to see more net positive, because again, this is not only about the company, it's about the planet. We don't have planet B. We don't. There is an impact of access to resources. There's an impact of supply chain. There's an impact of customer demand. So again, companies, and I would always recommend, even if you don't believe on it, and they should, because at the end of the day, it's part of the corporate citizenship. It's part of the brand reputation. It's licensed to operate, but we proved that there is a cost saving and there's absolutely a long-term profitability. So the logic says they should go for it. But if they have second thoughts about that, they should think then with compliance and regulations. If you ask me, before 2008, the region did not have knowledge or awareness, be it even not a regulation regarding green building. Now, fast forward to 2022, we have green building standards in Saudi, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Egypt, and now with the high oil prices, people look at efficient products, not only because they would like to protect the planet, and we all global citizens, we all reside on this planet. We are good humans. We really would like to make a change. But also, now, economically, there is a pure risk on supply chain disruption, high energy costs. So if you look at it, my advice to businesses to look at it from that perspective, then it will make even more sense for them to include it. It's never late. It's better late than never. That's my advice to them. When it comes to sustainability, it's better late than never, because when it's never, it means you're out of business, you're out of the market.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the climate is changing, and we are already starting to see the impacts of climate change within the region. And although the focus has been on trying to conserve resources and focus on energy reduction, there's also a growing trend now to actually think about climate adaptation, and COP27 is going to be talking a lot about actually adapting to the changing climate. So how do you see climate adaptation impacting your sector in particular, and potentially integrating new ways of constructing and designing or operating to adhere to these changes in the climate that we're facing?
Catherine, it's a very good point, actually, and things will accelerate more having COP27 and COP28 in our part of the world. So I don't think we've, as a sustainability practitioner, I don't think we ever had it as close as it is right now, and I'm very, very positive about it. But from a group perspective, we run climate risk assessments on asset level, business OPCO level, and a group level, and based on that, we start to include in the designs and in the narrative from the social part as well. So there is not only adaptation from a built environment. So that one, how we do it, we run climate risk assessment, and it reflects on the project management, on the build life cycle, and as well as on the design perspective. So that's technically, we started doing it actually 3 years ago to do that. So climate risk assessment, and based on an OPCO, on an asset level, OPCO level, and group level, and it feeds into the decision making, it feeds in the design. But also there's a social, like when we look at the ESG, there's a social and governance level. From a social perspective, there's a transparency part. Now we have young generation. You talk about 60% of the region under 30. These guys, they're not only in schools anymore. These guys actually work. They are decision makers, and they know and they're aware. So it's the digital era now. People have access to information. So to be transparent, people would not accept that they live or buy or work in a place that does not take climate change into consideration. Let me talk about water, with droughts everywhere. Now, Jordan is a hot topic now, the water. It's one of few countries globally, the Jordanian citizen gets water once a week. What does it mean for us as a business? So it means there's a part of the adaptation is to start investing in water solutions, be it STPs, be it technological innovation on air from water, for example. So we have no choice. And we talk about a region, an arid or semi-arid region, and you see the high-level temperatures globally. The second part as well, look at retaining talent. People would like, if I invest a lot, we're around 44,000 staff. People would like to, especially post COVID-19 with the global great resignation, talents would like to work for a company with a purpose. And this is something else as well to look at it. So we take all this into consideration. The end user, the built environment, the asset itself, the investments, the insurance part, and even when we go to investors when we go for green bonds, we don't put this into consideration. I think that it's a bit of an early stage, not from a group perspective, from a regional perspective, but I would envisage more and more interest and focus onto climate risk assessment. And this is actually what we do. One of the things that we will do in the SDG 13, we're going to start promoting for it because, again, license to operate and access to resources, it's one of the most important things. And this links also to food security, food, supply chain disruption, looking at regional access to resources, especially what happened with lockdowns globally. So the business narrative is changing, and it's a great opportunity to jump in and start including such risk assessment and being forecasting for climate change adaptation and impacts in your business perspective, be it built environment or anything else.
Great. I mean, it's good to hear that you've been doing these climate risk assessments over the past 3 years. I think it's something that in the region we're not maybe looking at in enough depth, just in general. And I think by looking at it from a climate risk perspective early on in your process and taking those outputs and making KPIs and goals to mitigate those measures is really important. Particularly the physical impacts that climate change might have. There's trillions of dollars worth of assets that are located along the coastlines and across the world, and they're exposed to sea level rise or coastal flooding. And this will have a really negative economic impact if it's not addressed at an early stage. And also the transition impacts of climate change, changes in the markets, consumer behavior, increasing regulations and government policy and so on. And you touched upon there as well that the social perspective and how actually the companies that are taking both these risks into consideration, but also capitalizing on the opportunities that a low carbon economy will have, actually does attract people to work with businesses because they have that impact, that meaning, and they're forward looking into the future. You mentioned a little bit about COP27 and COP28. Really exciting that both those COPs are going to be in the region. What key takeaways do you hope to see from these discussions?
That's a big question, Catherine. I think even if you ask the governments who are still, I think, in negotiations in Bonn, or they just finished, with COP, you cannot tell. I'm sorry. From Copenhagen to Paris, I've been to most of them, to Madrid, to Glasgow. But I tell you something about COP27 or COP28. My forecast, and I hope it will happen. I believe whatever anyone starts in COP27, we will finish it in COP28. There is a great collaboration now for a change between Egypt and the UAE, the two host countries. This is one. Two, having COP27 in Africa, Egypt, will make a voice for the mitigation part of climate change. We've been talking about adaptation, which is Europe, to be fair. But if you look at the global south, African countries, actually it's a hybrid. It's a great opportunity for mitigation, for existing, but also for an on-spot investments and adaptation. The best example for that, you go to Africa, you find a higher demand on smartphones where there is they jumped from landline to smartphones. So you see the transport, the application. So I really hope we will have the similar thing when it comes to climate change mitigation adaptation in the global south, assuming that the commitment for the $100 billion will be there and the global north will start paying. What I am worried about is the debate. Actually, I'm not worried. Actually, it will be a healthy debate between a global south and a global north. Being it in Africa is the polluters pay, which is the right of countries to develop, which I completely abide with. For example, I don't think it's fair for us to say shift for straight to renewables without thinking of a rickshaw driver in India or Africa that makes a living from that. So we need to start talking about just an inclusive transition. So I think there will be a good discussion about transition, mitigation, adaptation. There will be, I think, the global north will talk about adaptation, but we will say some people pushing for mitigation from the African countries. But COP28, I think COP28 will be the solution where the whole world will agree. Being Abu Dhabi, not Abu Dhabi in the UAE, it's a place where action and things happens. So I would say we will see more on the how to achieve the NDCs or an acceleration of fintech, climate tech investments there on that. So I would say I'm very optimistic of the two COPs. I cannot look at COP27 without thinking of COP28. I always think of COP27 and COP28 together because it's in the region. So I will not, even if nothing happened, I will not be disappointed or depressed like what happened in Copenhagen, no deal. We are not here, we will not be in COP27 to talk about deals. We are more about the how. And that's, for me, is a healthy debate. That's a healthy discussion, and I'm looking forward for it.
Great. Yeah, and completely agree with your thoughts there, and particularly with COP28, it is the global stock-take, in COP28. We'll get to understand where are we with aligned to our NDCs at a country level, how far are we from reaching the net zero commitments that many countries have signed up to. I guess with the outcomes and the discussions, are you looking particularly for anything around the retail sector with regards to supporting the energy transition?
I think retail and the whole world now should be realistic. We should talk about realistic targets and realistic transition, especially with the geopolitical things, with the rise of energy, with different geopolitical and socioeconomic factors happening around us. So I think private sector will have a great opportunity to create as a platform. But it's not only retail, it's not private sector. It will be a regulator role as well. The regulator, because we in this part of the world, in the Middle East and North Africa, regulations play a main role. So even retail would like to do over the targets they put for themselves. There is a regulation on what's the maximum capacity of renewable energy on-site generation, for example. What you can do on offsite. So that's the practicality. So I would say there will be an acceleration of the discussion between retail and private sector and the regulator. I would say there will be a huge understanding and awareness in the public sector for the net zero commitments and different government departments outside the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, outside the subject matters expert. And that's what I see. And this is where the private sector and retail will jump in to ensure, one, there is a positive environmental impact and great socioeconomic impact to make sense. So without that, I don't see it happening. So do I see an acceleration of discussion between taking step forwards from retail and private sector towards the regulator? Absolutely, yes. And we will see that. We will see governments engaging with all their employees in public sector to raise awareness on what does net zero mean, because they're committed. Now, we committed, but we did not discuss the how. I committed now as a government official, but I want to be there in 2050. So let's talk about the national plans to achieve net zero. And I think countries like the UAE started the discussions already on sectorial perspective. They talked to the cement, they're going to talk to the retail. They reached out to us, and I'm in discussion with them. So I've seen this happening. And that's the difference, I think, between the acceleration between what happened in these COPs and the previous COPs.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think, you made an important point. As a retailer, we have to be realistic to the extent that, there's only so much space we can put PV panels on roofs. And ultimately, although we can reduce the demand, the supply side needs to decarbonize just as fast, if not quicker, in order to, plug into cleaner energy systems. It's also good that you've signed up to the Science-Based Target Initiative, one of the first developers in the region to do that. So hoping to see more commitments from other developers in the near future.
Absolutely. I think SBTI, although I am now with the 1.5, is such a tough task, Catherine. It's not an easy task, and I think of the industry, building material producers like companies that produce, like Saint-Gobain, AkzoNobel. Like we need to be realistic with these guys. They are part of the industry as well. So we need a framework, and I think and SBTI is a good start. Although we should talk more about it in the region, raise awareness on the how. But I think it's a good start. And again, with SBTI and properties, we get verified, which is good. But it's a tough task. It's not an easy one.
Yeah, you mentioned about some of the manufacturers and materials, and steel and cement have a huge contribution to our global carbon footprint, and they're used completely across the construction industry. So we need to really look at ways to reduce our consumption of these materials, steel and cement, while at the same time those industries start to decarbonize, and they're very hard to abate sectors. So it is also a challenge for them. But I think by all the industries and disciplines working together, and each focus on the area that they have control over, implementing conservation measures, implementing decarbonization strategies, everyone needs to play their role. So it's really great to hear some of the initiatives that you've been doing today. And yeah, I think we can wrap it up at there. It's been really good to speak with you, and I don't know if you have any closing comments just to provide.
Yeah, if I may say, I don't think when it comes to net zero there is a bad people and good people. I think regardless we achieve the net zero or not, it's the journey that matters. We should be bold, and our true north is net zero, yes, but we should ensure that we put a platform on the how we achieve it. We need to be realistic, and I think I insist on the word realistic because the world is changing around us. We cannot commit for something and forgot like the social part, the unemployment, the education, the hunger, the poverty. Yes, we need to protect our climate, but we need to engage the climate action in all the sectors to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind. We are in this together. And again, I always say when we don't have a planet B, it's not me and you, it's all of us on this. And the fact that we are working for one target, regardless the level of how fast and how accelerated you are to achieve that target, is for me is good enough. And that's the most important thing the world needs to know.
100% agree that just transition is so important. I couldn't agree more. And by all playing our part and making sure that everyone is brought along this journey and we get the opportunities that it has, and leaving no one behind, as you said, it's a strong message.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate speaking to you this morning and hearing your insights. It's been really good to catch up again, and hopefully see you at one of our conferences or panel discussions again soon.
Absolutely, Catherine. I really enjoyed talking to you on the panel and today. So next time, if I see any panel, you guys are part of it, I would say yes, for the sake of a good discussion and debate.
Ibrahim, thanks again for joining us today. You have provided us with a fresh perspective on what commitments need to be made at both the sectoral and national level in order to affect meaningful climate action. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, you can subscribe to our WSP Anticipate podcast via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud to hear the latest insights from industry experts and thought leaders.